All right, welcome everybody. We're going to be starting in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining us today. Just give it a couple of minutes. We're going to get started, okay?
All right, everyone, welcome to day 26 of our 30-day redemption. I am your host, Kashab. Thank you for joining me on this journey. We're doing a 30-day redemption. We are into day 26. It has been a fantastic journey. Hopefully, everyone that has joined with us from day one has learned a lot. And hopefully, information can be used within yourself or within your family or community to create a better life, and mostly to help to deal with all that's going on in the outside world during the quarantine. Um, it seems like some people are having some issues with maybe sitting still, being bored, finishing Netflix. But for us, hopefully, you've been able to tune in and to gather some really good information so that you can have a rebirth. And speaking of rebirth, that's our topic for today. And we're going to come from a few different angles on rebirth. So just make sure you have a pen and pad and you're able to sit back for another hour. We may go a little bit over and try to glean from the information that'll be presented to you today. So speaking of rebirth, as you can see in the image that we have, the rebirth is something that happens not only physically. Um, some of us from a more faith-based background may look at rebirth as something that is physical. But rebirth is a spiritual concept as well, and it's also even a scientific and a mental concept. So we're going to take a look at all of those angles. So let's start with energy. It's very important to understand that energy never dies. So what part of the creator story are you returning to learn from, to edit, or to finish? And that's an important question, because if the energy never died, where is it coming from? And wherever it's coming from, once it enters you and becomes part of your makeup, your biological makeup, as a child or as a fetus or an adult, once it becomes part of your makeup, what are you supposed to do with it? And where did it come from? And what was its original intent? And that's a very important question, because we need to have a starting point. Because if you're reborn, for example, if you're from a faith background, Christian background, and you hear born again, if you're born again and you're still doing the same things, conceptually, you did a born again ceremony, but are you born again? Did something different happen? And so as we take a look at this energy that's coming from the original source, when that energy enters you, does it have a different effect and a transformation in life? So what happens? Before you're born, you're actually alive. If you're from a faith-based background, um, there's a scripture, I believe in Galatians, that says, "Are you so foolish, having begun in the spirit? Are you now made perfect by the flesh?" So if you were already energy, or you were already spirit prior, that means that you were actually alive before you are alive. So when we look at this screen, it says life, which is before you were in the body, you were alive. And then you experience what we call life, but it's actually death. Why do we say it's death? Because that spirit and that energy has come into this body, and it was before unrestricted. It was infinite, immortal energy. And then it comes into a finite, temporary body. And so now, while within this finite, temporary body, it has to now live again. And so that's the life, death, life stage. We're now looking at, since we're in this body, for those of us who are human and alive on the call, you now have an opportunity to what? Live again. And so understanding how this energy is flowing and understanding this outside of the body experience, we are able to see what the responsibility or what the goal is or what we can do. Okay. So instead of only looking at death from a biological perspective, let's also factor in the physics angle of death. When someone dies, do they die? The body does. But the spirit or the energy continues. According to the law of the conservation of energy, not a bit of you is gone. You're just less orderly, by Aaron Freeman. So you go from finite body back into infinite. You go from exclusion to inclusion. So it seems like when we're in the body, we're kind of disconnected, but you can be connected while in the body. And we're going to take a look at that as well. So let's look at your physics makeup. Your physics makeup is energy. So what is energy? In science, it says in physics, energy is the quantitative property that must be transferred to an object in order to perform work or to heat the object. Energy is a conserved quantity. The law of conservation of energy states that energy can be converted in form, but not created or destroyed. So you, from a physics perspective, are infinite in your energy form, in your spirit form, but you are not infinite in your flesh form. So do you die? No, you just transform. Done some studies, and in one study it says when infinity becomes intelligent energy. What does that mean? Infinite infinity is the creator of this energy. And before it is energy, it is infinite. You can't even define it. You can't even put a name to it. It's just infinite infinity. Some people call that the universe. That's incorrect. The universe is the creation from that infinite infinity. The universe is intelligent energy. It is the creation. Let there be light, for example, is a creation. But the creator of that energy is infinite and more infinite than that. You can't even define it. So what we have been doing is defining the creation as the creator. That's incorrect. The creator is infinite. So when infinite infinity, which is the creator, even given the name creator, is, it could be borderline incorrect, but let's for understanding's sake say the infinite infinity is the creator, becomes intelligent energy. That's when we see light. That's when we see universe. That's when we see the sun. For example, you have people worshiping the sun. Well, you're worshiping the creation. The sun and you are the same. They're both creations. So we have to move ourselves from that and look at, there is a source of this infinite energy, and we are, and the energy in us is the creation from that source. Okay. So in scripture it says the earth was not without form and void, and darkness. I'm sorry, hold on for 1 second, everyone. Okay, it says the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. So just to dissect that a little bit, when the earth was without form and void, it means there was nothing out there. The everything out there was still infinite infinity. There was no definition. It was the creator in just the creation wasn't even created yet. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. That's when infinite infinity became intelligent. It lit up. Okay, the Spirit was about to, I should say, light up the creation. Okay, so we'll cover that. So what happened? I guess scientifically, what happened? A particle, well, a photon is what happened. So that darkness, and then the Spirit is about to now activate the photon. The Spirit, which is infinite, is about to activate something, and this activation is the photon of light. So we're going from the spirit world into the physic world. Okay, so a photon is a particle representing a quantum of light or other electromagnetic radiation. A photon carries energy proportional to the radiation frequency, but has zero rest mass. What is zero rest mass? The mass of a body when at rest. It has zero rest mass, so it's not sitting somewhere. It's infinitely somewhere. It's not sitting somewhere. It's infinitely somewhere. So the photon is, when it says in scripture, the verse right after the one we read, when the Spirit moved, the Spirit, and then it says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. So the light that was created was the photon. The photon is the creation. That is the energy that was created. That's the energy that made the planet. That's the energy that's in each one of us. We're made of all of this energy. That energy was created by an infinite source that is without form and that is not definable. So you can see by that how incorrect it is to call the universe the creator. It is disrespectful because the universe is the creation. It is disrespectful to call the sun the creator because the sun is the creation as well. Once you can see it, once you can touch it, once it's matter, once it has the photon in it, it is no longer the creator. It is the creation. We are made up of this photon. So you are infinite because the energy that's in you from the photons that's in you cannot die. So it's the first law of thermodynamics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change forms. In any process, the total energy of the universe remains the same. In life, the human body comprises matter and energy. That energy is both electrical, impulsed, and signal, and chemical reactions. So you're made up of more than just a body. You're made up of more than just cells. There are invisible parts of you that remain alive after the biology or the physical parts of you passes away. So before we go on, why is that important? Because we're talking about rebirth. And so the rebirth actually happened when you were born because you were already existing in energy form. And then when you were born, you died, even with the energy in you, because the shell, the human body, became temporary. How do we know it became temporary? Because you have a lifespan. And once that body became temporary, now you have the chance to be born again after you leave this body, or what we call tap in or align with your infinite energy, your photons, your spiritual energy, and align yourself and live while in the body. So you can live while in the body, even though you're alive. So some people are alive physically, but dead disconnected. And we're going to touch on what does that mean. So in death, the collection of atoms of which you are comprised of are repurposed. These atoms and that energy will always be around. Therefore, your light, that is the essence of your energy, not to be confused with your actual consciousness, will continue to echo throughout space until the end of time. So you're an infinite creation. The only limitations is you. We're going to look at what creates those limitations. But first, let's look at your biological makeup, which is the source of a lot of our limitations. I'm going to talk a little bit about DNA. And remember, for some of you, I know you're taking notes, some of you are taking notes, but whatever you miss, this information is going to be replayed. So just really try to listen, take the notes you can, but don't worry about anything you miss because it will be replayed. Okay. So what is this DNA? The chemical, which is also referred to as your DNA, is vital for all living beings, even plants. It is important for inheritance, coding for protein, and the genetic instructions guide for life and its processes. DNA holds the instructions. So you have this infinity creates this photon. This photon has the creator in the photon. This photon now works with the biological you when you're born, and it has instructions and gives the instructions to this DNA now, which carries your bloodline, your family information, your instructions from the creator, your gifts, all of this is transferred from the spirit. So it comes from the infinite into the photon, from the photon into your biology. And this is the makeup that we are, okay? DNA holds the instructions for an organism's or cell's development and reproduction and ultimately death. So you're made up of instructions. So for many people that say, I don't know what my purpose is, or I don't know, it's in you. The information is in you. And how to tap into it is what we have to examine. And when I say tap into it, this examination will help us to have a rebirth. Something has to click. The DNA and the blood you carry goes back to the very beginning. So in you is the makeup of some ancient ancestor traveling through this blood. And you have the coding of all that information. It goes all the way back. This may be the source of some dreams. This may be the source of some inspiration. It's definitely the source of some habits. It's definitely the look. It's in your facial expressions. It's in how you walk. But it goes all the way back. It goes all the way back before the flood. If you're someone that doesn't believe in scripture, it goes all the way back. If you're talking about dinosaur years, whatever it is that you believe, it goes back. It goes back beyond today. But in scripture it says, and has made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on the face of the earth. So everyone goes back to some original person. They tell you in science is Lucy and all these other cute names. It goes back before that. Okay. And that scripture is Acts 17:26. Let's take a look at this quick little piece.
You, Amir, are looking at your third great grandfather. That is your original African ancestor, brother. That is Charlie Lewis.
How? How?
How'd you? The photo comes from a descendant of Charlie Lewis like you, one of your cousins.
That's my great grandfather.
That is your third great grandfather.
The eyes are the same.
Yeah, how lucky you are, Amir. It's a miracle.
I never imagined this in my entire life that I'd see this. I had to keep looking at them because those are my eyes, man.
Well, now you know where they came from.
This is coming full circle.
How far back does it go? I mean, can you imagine the further back you go, the more you start to see, oh, this is where I get that from. So he's seeing eyes, but maybe you'll find out some of the musical talent. A lot of times we are exactly the same people. We are just continuing the conversation as different parts of ourselves. We're continuing the conversation from someone 100 years ago, someone 50 years ago, someone 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. We carry the same way, but our environments alter how we deal. So a series of variables bury the true self, the original photon, original creation, original intent, original energy, original DNA. Some things act against that, and you become more buried underneath this character. What are the variables? Well, I listed, this is not an exhaustive list, but what are some of the variables? Well, your parents, the mate selection of your parents. There may be an intent, and the intent may get lost in the mate selection, selecting a scenario that creates so much confusion that the original intent that is built into the photon and built into the DNA, and that was the creator's intent, is lost in translation once it becomes a human body. It's lost in the biology. The parents' mate selection sets the stage for your physical, mental, and spiritual foundation. Some of the things we say, that's just the way I am. That's not just the way you are. That's the way you've become. You've become something. The DNA transfers during conception. The blood carries the DNA and coded instructions. And that ends up inside of you from two individuals that may or may not. You might be a hybrid creation of two strange species that you are a conflict just because. You have to break past that. And you could break past that because the DNA still has the instructions. The energy is still infinite. But the confusion is within how you were born, where you were born, and if you break past that. So C is the external environments can activate or suffocate the genetic memory carried in the DNA. You may want to do certain things, have great ideas, want to break through, but circumstances, social norms, like, nah, that's not for you. You may have certain racism things blocking. You may have certain personal limitations. You may have parents that may limit you. You may have siblings that may limit you. You may have content that limits you. So the external environment can either activate or suffocate the genetic memory in the DNA. Your parenting, maybe the parenting you've dealt with or suffered from, the nutrition that you had, the sounds during pregnancy. All of this affects the baby before they are even born. They come into conflict. Like you read in scripture, it talks about the birth of Jacob and Esau, and they were fighting in the womb before born. And when they were born, at birth, they were fighting. What are they fighting for? Power. And these children came up and had a long-term nemesis relationship because that fight began before they were even born. They had beef from the womb. What are another condition? The conditions and environment each child is born into continues to nurture the experience, be it a good one or a bad one. If you come up and your parents are on drugs, your reality is going to be different, even though you have specific DNA instructions, and even though you have the energy of the creator through the photon, your environment is like crack or drugs and poverty, and you have the will, but you don't have the platform. So those are some variables. It kills the true self. You get lost in yourself. And that's why sometimes I would say, man, the body is a grave. The body's a coffin. And you have to now be born from that coffin to tap back into who you are or who you were created to be originally. The energy that never dies, aka the spirit, plus the DNA that transfers into the child can either be an environment that nurtures it or suffocates its instruction. Also, the social and political structures around them, the culture, the language, the education of the child, all of this plays a part in their development and purpose. It can kill your purpose. You have somebody telling you you can't do something, and it's a parent, man, you can't do it. That's a stupid idea. Go do this. Well, I want to be, I want to be a singer. Ah, that's stupid. Go to medical school. Who wants to be a singer? And then you press past and do it and then succeed. And they're like, oh, yeah, my son, yeah, I knew he could do it. I knew she could do it. It takes bravery and courage to be born again. The energy in the DNA becomes more influenced towards purpose and the original intent when the environment and education are in alignment with that. Poor content and influences can hijack the true self and turn one into a character or an actor or some other artificial name, some other artificial thing. When someone says, what do you do? First thing we tell them is our artificial talent. Well, I just graduated from law school and I'm pursuing a. Who are you? If I ask 10 people, who are you? What is your gift? What are you here to do? They don't know. Most people have no clue because all they know is what the artificial self is, what the artificial self must do. But when you ask them who are they, it's an unheard of conversation. A lot of times I hear, no one has ever asked me that. Write that down. Who are you for real? Who is the true self? So there's a battle. Artificial self versus true self. This is a conflict of interest. This is spirit versus flesh. This is the battle that everyone has to fight. You have people encouraging you to be more fleshly, more artificial. Man, you better not forget where you came from. No, I want to forget it because I need to know who I was before I came from that physical place. I want to forget it if it's not going to serve me. Artificial self versus true self. Again, your parents' mate selection sets the stage for who you are biologically and chemically. B, the DNA transfers during the conception and the artificial name is given. Who are you? Oh, I'm Michael Johnson. No, you're not. You were named Michael Johnson. Who are you? Then you make a covenant with the world under Michael Johnson. Then you register your name, register your birth certificate, social security card, get an ID, and you are Michael Johnson. Or some of us say, I am tired. I'm sick of it. I'm this and I am that. And so you also add other I am names to you. Some people have said, I'm just so stupid. I'm an idiot. Erase that. C, the external environments nurture the newly created creature and steers its course. All of this adds to your artificial personality and artificial self. D, society, politics, culture, education, media, and opportunities become your reality. The artificial self lives. It's being fed all of these things. Oh, yeah. Well, what are you, a Democrat or Republican? Where do you live? What's your zip code? Oh, I'm a New Yorker. I'm a Democrat from New York. And we have a culture here in New York. And I was educated at Cornell University. And my social media profile, and you give your name, and you just lost in yourself. Who are you? You are not who you think. The artificial self also finds comfort in the distortions, even when it goes against their inner compass. You start to, especially, don't give some people a uniform because you go into full character. There's a video called The Experiment that they did in Stanford University back in the days, and they took some people and gave them two different roles. One was supposed to play the role of the prisoners, and one was supposed to play the role of the prison guards. And that experiment, in the short period of time, under 10 days, I think 7 days or so that they were doing this experiment, the people began to exhibit the behavior of a prison guard and the abuse of power. And the people who were playing the roles of the prisoner began to exhibit the behavior of prisoners psychologically. We're living in that reality. Give someone a uniform, they transform into whatever. It doesn't even have, they don't have to be a police officer. It could be a mall cop. You transform the power, the badge. You're in full character mode. You're in full character mode. We are in full character mode because we find comfort in these distorted titles and distorted instructions that have nothing to do with the photon, has nothing to do with the DNA, has nothing to do with the creator's instructions. We are just the figment of someone else's imagination. As I said in day 2, your content now in your mind is some other entity taking real estate in your brain, not paying you any rent, not paying you any mortgage, wants to occupy you, aka possess you. So we talk about possession, and have you playing out this role. Life is a stage, they say. You're an actor. You have to quit. So the true self, what are some of the variables in the true self? Well, there's a divine purpose given to that energy. It has a coding. There's gift and talents that planted in the DNA. That's why certain people can sing naturally. Oh yeah, well, yeah, my great grandmother found out she could sing and play the piano. Yeah, my great grandfather danced really well. Yeah, my art runs in our family. Well, we're just a family of fighters. There's things planted in the DNA. The true self also have callings. It has dreams. It has passions built into the energy and the DNA and the spirit. And these things become a mental compass because something inside you is pushing you somewhere. And people say, man, I always wanted to work with children, or I always wanted to work with the elderly, man. You know what? I always wanted to just own my own business. You're inside of your body alive in your 30s talking about, I always wanted to. In your 40s, well, I always wanted to. Well, do it. Become who you are. So these opportunities now are presented to the true self to bring you closer to destiny if you keep it in your mind. I always want to open my business. Somebody offers your business. Hey, you want to go into a partnership? I don't know. I don't know. I always wanted to. The opportunities become a fork in the road. Are you going to follow? You're creating the opportunity because you always wanted to. It's in you. It presents itself. What are you going to do? You're going to be afraid, or you're going to do it? I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready. Maybe 2021. Okay. 2021. Presents it again. Are you going to do it, or are you not going to do it? Are you going to follow the compass, or are you going to be afraid? Is the artificial self going to live, or is the true self is going to live? No, I just don't want to do the entrepreneurial thing, man. I got my job. I really don't have the time after, work. I have to spend time with the children. Like, you break it all the way down. And then the coronavirus hits and you got to sit home. And you be like, damn, you know what? I should probably start that business. You probably should, because you can't do anything else. D, the opportunities bring you closer to the destiny. They're presented. The breakthroughs break the distortion. When you now, I'm going to do it, you have a breakthrough. Maybe this conversation may offer a breakthrough. Wait a minute. You know what? You're right. I always did have this inside of me to do it. I'm going to pursue it. And so the breakthrough breaks the distortions, because the distortions are all the things you learned along the way that says you can't do it. Well, I'm black, and in my area, man, I don't know. They won't let me. I don't know. I can't. I mean, where am I going to get the money from? These are the conversations you have with yourself to tell yourself. This is how tricky it is. The artificial self is telling the true self it can't. And the true self existed before the artificial self. The true self is the one the creator made. It is the one that has the information in the DNA. It is the one that is a photon of light that was around before the artificial self. But somehow the artificial self is so intelligent that it can tell the true self what it can and can't do. So the breakthrough breaks that distortion. Now I could do whatever. Why? It's in me. I have a vision. I'm going to do it. And I'm willing to take the consequences of doing it, even if I fail. F. Self-discovery empowers the courage. Oh, this is who I am. I accept. Okay, I'm going to be brave and go and do what it is that I have to do and take whatever comes with it. And so the true self begins to live. To remain conscious within the artificial self is to surrender your purpose and suffocate your destiny. So if you like, yeah, my reality, I've put in 4 years, I've got a certificate to, whatever it is that you do. I'm not even going to put a title to this. I don't want to disparage anyone's walk. But you put in time and you have that knowledge sitting in your mind, in your conscious mind, even in your subconscious mind, and you think that that is going to be your end, that this is what you're going to do until thy kingdom come. You have surrendered something burning inside of you, that burning desire, that calling, people call it. You've surrendered that. But if you are brave or courageous and you want to discover the true self and listen to that inner voice and, yeah, something is telling me to do this and I did it and wow, look what happened. And when you start that, you activate opportunities. You activate, you call people, you attract your tribe. Once you're doing what you're doing, your tribe finds you. What is the proof of that? 30-day redemption. We put this together. You're on the phone. The tribe is being called by something is being presented for the tribe to show up. If nothing was believed, nothing ventured, nothing gained, no one would show up. We wouldn't have this conversation. It wouldn't be present. I followed that inner calling. Here we are. Wherever that has to go, it has to go. So to discover the true self and to walk courageously in your true self is your rebirth. Because you're going from death to life again without dying. But you do die. You die, the artificial self dies. So that which is born of the flesh is the scripture, John 3:6-7. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. You can have this happen in your body. Marvel not that I say unto you, you must be born again. You have to be reborn in the body, transformation of your mind, realizing, wow, you know what? I'm young enough to try it. If you're 50, you're young enough to try it. You have 30 years. Hopefully, if you're eating properly, if you're living properly. But at 50, you still got 30 years to do something. At 20, you got 60 years. At 70, you got 10 years. You can live at any stage you're alive and be reborn. So how do you get there? Sounds good, Kashab. Sounds real philosophical, but I'm a practical person. I need practical steps. Show me what to do. How do I get there? First, take inventory of your artificial self. Write it down. All the stuff you are, where you were born, what you learned, what your skill is, who your parents was, what did they do? Who are your people? Who are your family? What are your gifts? What are your talents? What education did you get? What school did you go to? What degree? Make a list. Take full inventory of the self, everything. Compare the two. Take inventory of the true self. Oh, I really know how to bake good, man. I could cook. I could bake anything. Where'd you learn that? I don't know. Just good at it. I'm artistic. I could just draw anything I see. I just love photos. I love children. I love people, man. I love traveling. Whatever. Take your inventory and put the artificial self in perspective. Okay, I see you. I accept you. Don't, now I'm talking about the artificial self. Don't hate on you now, but put you in perspective up until today. You know what? I've done it. I did it. I've made those sacrifices. I've made peace with myself. Then take inventory again of your true self and also accept that. But I have not pursued my inner passions. I have not lived to my full potential. And so I accept that I have not, and I accept that I will. So acceptance of your artificial self by taking inventory, acceptance of your true self by taking inventory. Then you put the true self in perspective, and then you create a clear mental picture of who this true self is. We call it being true to self, and how you will let it live moving forward. There has to be a day when the artificial person is no longer getting your undivided attention. Now, you may have to perform at work, and you may be like, I'm going to give artificial self from 8 to 6 or 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or 9. I'm going to give it its time. But when I'm not there, I'm giving my true self the time. But what do? We give the artificial self the time. Then we come home and we give CNN, Hulu, Netflix the rest of the time. And then we sleep with the content of the artificial self and Netflix and Hulu and wasting time. And then we wake up and do it again. You begin to age when you go against yourself. You begin to age when you go against your nature and your calling. You begin to age when that photon in you that has instructions is going against the electromagnetic field that it's in. You begin to age because you're going against nature. Artificial life is against nature. It's unnatural. You think it's natural to be sitting 8 hours a day and your cholesterol is going up? You think that's natural? You think it's natural to sit someplace for X amount of hours a day and you start having heart problems? You don't think the powers that be know that by you sitting for X amount of hours, you will never get your retirement money? It's mathematic. They know it. So following your true purpose may actually help you to live longer, to see that 80, to see that 90. Put the true self in perspective and create a clear mental picture of who this true self is and how you will let it live moving forward. Create a birth date. When are you going to die to the artificial self and live? Set the date. If you want to be cute and make it the same date as your birthday, make it that. If you want to be cute and be like, I want to be born in the summer, make it that. But set a birth date. Don't cold turkey disconnect from the artificial self. You may have anxiety because the artificial self still pays the bills, right? But set a date. Set a birth date. Do it this year. If you need help, use images to help with the visualization. You have to see the clear picture. If you can't see the clear picture, you won't be able to create it. You have to see yourself in your proper order, in your proper glory. Create a theater in the mind for the production called True Self. There's more. Yesterday we gave a list. The list was called How to Transform. So we're going to add to that list and we're going to call it How to Transform from You, the fake you, the name given at birth, the one in the distortion, the one buried in this coffin called self, the artificial you, to you, who you really are. You have to fill that in. So what do? Again, create a schedule to discipline you. Deliberate content to manifest you. That should be in quotes because you want to create and manifest you, the you in quotes. So anywhere you see you after that is the one in quotes. It's the true self. So the you we're trying to create is the true self. Deliberate content. Create a clear picture. In the theater of your mind, who is this person for real? Don't create another artificial self. Find a true self. What is the regimen? Some kinds of foods are good for you that may not be good for someone else. Find out what's good for you. to create the you? What is good content? What is good regimen, exercise? Get someone to hold you accountable to the true self, to nurture the you. Get adequate sleep so that you could decode based on the content of the true self going into your mind and going into your subconscious, so that that true self begins to live even in your dream state, even in your meditation, and keep taking notes, because those notes are going to show you the instructions pulled from the DNA, pulled from the original intent, pulled from the spirit, pulled from the ancestors, pulled from, you're pulling it in, you're writing it down. You're going to follow those instructions. Spend time in nature, water and soil, to reconnect with you. Again, all the yous after should be the one in quote, because it is the true you that you're creating. Spend time with you, the true you, in meditation and prayer. Sleep also helps, but in the daytime, meditate. Get that picture. Go look at your images that you want to create, that you want to tap into. Speak with your accountability partner. Press towards that person so that the other person begins to die. People are going to say, you've changed. You're different. They can see it all over. You're just different. There's something different about you. Yeah. I'm the new you. If you have to deal with a therapist to help flush some of that out, sure. If you need to speak to a spiritual advisor that you know and you trust, sure. But make sure they know you, the new you. Explain to them who you are. And then attract your tribe. And that's number 7. You have to be careful, because some of these therapists and some of these people may want to pull you more into the artificial. They want to make you normal. They want to give you drugs and other things to kill your true self. Be careful, because not everybody is looking out for your transformation. Some need to keep you in the social norm space, because there's an economics built behind that. If you're an obedient citizen, you're going to crank out more taxes. So just be careful. All therapists are not, do not have your best interests in mind to transform, because some of them don't believe in anything more than science and more than the social norm. Some of themselves are artificial. So just be careful with that space. I mentioned it because we mentioned it yesterday in coming out of a cult. But then when you're going into the true self, you have to know who you're talking to. Number 8, tell the story of the two of you. This is who I was, and this is who I became. And it's a transformational book of your life, becoming you. You've seen the Becoming Michelle Obama. She talked about becoming Michelle Obama. Well, you need to write your memoir, Becoming You, transforming from artificial self to real self. By and put your name. If anybody does a book, just give me a little mention in the foreword, please. Thanks. You are the first fruits. What does that mean? So for 2,000 years ago, the apostles received the Holy Spirit. And they used that Holy Spirit to speak life into an audience of people. The listeners were resurrected by that spiritual knowledge transferred to them. Their words was like water and caused a spiritual revolution of that time. And this event happened during the exact season as your traditional holy day called the Feast of First Fruit. Today they call it Pentecost. Guess what tonight is? Tonight is that time. Who knows what will happen? Who knows what kind of transformation will happen inside of you? So the apostles were able to spiritually impact the people. They watered them with knowledge, and the Creator began to blossom and harvest his first fruits of the new season. Some of us have been on this journey for 26 days, and this 26 days falls within this first fruit season, this Pentecost season. What does it mean? What does Pentecost mean? It means 50 days after the Passover. And so that 50 days, which should be sundown tonight, that time is the time when the disciples gathered. And so we're in that season, and maybe you will be the first fruit when you now transform from artificial self to real self and tap into your purpose and then begin to live that. You become the first fruit or the firstborn in your time to wake up from this grave. That's resurrection. That's first fruit. So they watered the people with knowledge, and the creator began to blossom and harvest his first fruit of the new season back then. And so during this time, people are awakening from spiritual slumber to purpose and the newness of life. So may the words we speak today and always bring life to you, your true you, and resurrect you from the artificial self to your true self. And you can find that breakdown in Acts, the second chapter. You can read the whole thing, or you can read 1 to 4. And hopefully, this lesson and this discussion has been a blessing to you in you seeing some things to do to come from death to life, from artificial self to true self. So I'm going to open up the calls for any questions or any comments that anyone may have, any feedback. I see some comments in the section here. I see Yane got some hand claps. Thank you, sis. Um, Someone mentioned even at work, they ask you to be artificial self. You're not allowed to be your true self. You got it in my book. Cool. And thank you for that. I believe that's my cousin. And I didn't pay him to say that. So I appreciate you, cousin. All right. So I'm opening up the lines. Does anyone have any comments, any thoughts, any struggle? Is anyone artificial to self telling them, man, that's a bunch of hogwash? I love me just the way I am. I'm open for any commentary.
Hey, I just wanted to say thank you for this whole message, because it kind of summed up a lot of things. Like, me and my family, we've been doing a lot of Zoom calls, FaceTime and getting together. And one of the things that we talked about was like generational curses and generational blessings. Like, a lot of people talk about the curses part, but there are things passed down. So like, for instance, my grandfather did not raise my mom and my uncles. But towards the end of his life, he got in contact with all of us. He was a dentist and he taught dentistry in college. My sister, who never knew him, is a dentist. My grandmother, who passed away, was a barber. And when I became a barber, I wasn't even thinking about my grandmother, but I became a barber, and everyone was saying, oh my God, you're just like your grandmother. And it's like, these things, I wondered, and I was asking my family this, do you think these things are passed down to us? But when you were talking about it, it made so much sense. And I really felt empowered. I felt empowered just knowing that somewhere down my line in my family, there were people with purposes, and those purposes still live in us and are passed down to our kids as well. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, and that's the fact, and we get to build in to the future generation. Now, if we don't restrict them, or if we don't suffocate them, we want to find out what is the absolute best environment for you to tap into who you are, and that may be content. That may be an environment of freedom, of of expression. I don't know the exact answer of how each person's environment should look, but I think we suffocate it by forcing certain behavior, certain school. Like you hear Montessori school, and I guess I also have I know Alexandra, she's a teacher, and maybe she'll chime in on this. But certain school environments suffocates children's creativity, and then there's some environments that allow them to learn at their own pace and to be free to express themselves. So Alice, I don't know if you want to jump in on that, but can you talk just a little bit about that experience as a teacher and also you yourself?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I taught Head Start for, I don't know, over 10 years. And in the Head Start, sort of like the Montessori, the child is free to explore. It's more student-led than teacher. So if the student has an interest in this, okay, well, I'm going to jump on that. I'm going to go ahead and facilitate, give them all the resources they need so they can develop that interest. So early childhood is great for that. And so is Montessori. But when you get into the older grades, and when I had moved to kindergarten, that's where I noticed that, everything just stifled them. And it was really sad to see, they wanted to express themselves, but with all the restrictions and the time limits and the curriculum that you're supposed to do it this way, then the child starts to shut down. And then you start, I mean, who they are starts to diminish. Their interest is no longer important to them because they're so programmed into just being this way. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves is just letting the children just develop. Give them everything that they need and let them develop. And then it's just like me. I guess I'm like the kids as well because I'm starting to develop now in my 40s. With all the restrictions with the schools, you know, my parents say, you know, this is how things should be. And it just did not feel comfortable. I wasn't comfortable in my skin. You know, something was off until I just started, you know, going into me and exploring me and expressing me. So just like the children, when they're really young and they get them young, 3, 4, 5 years old, that's when they start training. You know, it keeps on going until hopefully, you know, you're able to break out of that system and then start to explore you.
And thank you for that. And it also seems like, you know, they say you do anything for 21 days or 30 days, like we've been doing 30 days, it becomes habit. Can you imagine doing that schooling for, you know, 10, 15, 20 years? You can't break from those habits now because you have to actually literally be retaught everything. You have to be retaught you. And so that's what this spark of this conversation is. And we will take it into a workshop level of self-discovery and helping you to find you and to develop you and to build you, to be freeing you from whatever type of illusions we learn. So thank you for that, Alex.
I just want to add something to what Alex said.
Okay, cool.
I've heard a lot of comedians say that before they pursued their career, their teaching, Martin Lawrence or other people, they're giving them 15 minutes in the classroom when they discovered that they were comics and actually sparked them to move in that direction. A lot of comedians say have the same story, you know. So just wanted to add that.
You see that? And so this is it. So try to find where you're going to pull your inspiration from. It's usually inside, but you know, an outside catalyst can't hurt. It's just when that outside catalyst now begins to suffocate or steer, and now you go how they say, you go from the oven to the frying pan. You go from one bad situation to another bad situation. So let's work on that. Make sure that you are making the lists of your artificial self and your true self. Make sure you're setting a birth date. And I could be wrong about this year. You'd be like, I don't want to do it this year. I want to do it next year. Whatever, just as long as you're moving in a direction, everyone is going to be birthed at a different rate. But that is ultimately what we would like to do. We would like to break out from, in this redemption, being redeemed from the artificial self and being birthed as the true self. We have a comment in here from Dana. She said, excellent presentation. I agree. I think the school systems are designed to suffocate our children's true selves. Absolutely. In the school system, in the corporate system, it is a design to perpetuate further economics. Now, there is, for example, in China, when we talked yesterday about totalism and thought reform, now they have a social scoring system. And China has a social scoring system where each citizen gets a score for whatever behavior that they do that perpetuates the Chinese dream, that perpetuates the Chinese agenda. And you can't tell me that America isn't going to try to implement that same thing to be competitive with China and to make sure that each citizen is maximizing on their output. And how do I know that to be a fact? You can Google something in the World Bank called the Human Capital Index. You know, let's take it into tangible. Is the Human Capital Index, where the World Bank is saying that the countries who show that they have the highest human capital by your education and your health, those things give each individual a social score. And that social score will determine if that state or that country receives funding. So look that up. And guess who was sitting on the panel during a discussion about Human Capital Index. Bill Gates. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. So somebody's trying to make sure that the performance level, not your performance as from a divine perspective or from an infinite perspective or from a purpose perspective, but from an economic perspective. So you don't think that they're going to push to make sure that you are performing at the highest artificial self level? They will. Okay. Yeah, and Yanni had a comment. I think they kind of do that now with the census. Well, that's the beginning. They want to know who's who, and then they're going to make sure that your performance at the highest level for that. Okay, so keep that in mind. And I'll end there. And I wanted to thank you all. I'm going to again fire up my screen, but thank you all for jumping in. I hope that the presentation adds extreme value to your life. And I hope that as we finish up the next few days of the 30-day redemption, that you're putting these things into place. I know it's a lot of information, but you have access to the information via Facebook. You can go on facebook.com and /30-day redemption and just look at all the videos. Take your time, take notes. And when we have the workshops, just jump in and let's continue this journey. Okay. If you want to get in touch with me, facebook.com /Ask Kashab Inc. And I will be loading up some content there if you want to speak to me. Other than that, share the 30-day redemption. We will continue this journey. I'm just trying to see how they announce if people are going to be home again for May. Seems that way. Some states open, some states not. So we may do May or June or both. Okay. But make sure you follow 30-day redemption. Make sure you share. And can I ask you all, please make sure that you share when we're having these presentations. Share it on your wall. Share with your friends so that we can have other people jump in and glean as well. Okay. Have a perfect day.
Can I just add one thing really quick, Ashab? And for those that are watching, if you're really getting something out of it, this is Rafaela, by the way. Make sure you go on our page and write the testimonies, what you're getting out of it. That'll be really awesome to have other people see that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, and have a perfect day, and may you find your true self. God bless. Take care.